Municipal Watch, bringing your local issues on the national agenda. SAFM, leading the conversations that move us.
All right, we continue the conversation on the talking point. Let me apologize for those WhatsApp voice notes. Yeah, we had a technical issue, so unfortunately we couldn't bring you many of them. We will try to play them throughout the rest of the show. We just need to continue with the show so that we don't take too much time problem solving, but we do apologize for that. So in studio with me is Mielane Holeni. You know that he's become our consultant on matters of local government, him and other voices that we'll be bringing onto the show within this hour. So one of the big issues around local government always sits with accountability and oversight. And so what we thought we'd do, Mielane, is that because it's the very first show of the year, we would have a conversation that really helps us to understand the accountability and oversight mechanisms that exist at a local government level. And the purpose here is to empower ourselves with information. Because when you have put your hope and trust in a system, but the system in and of itself is failing you. So those that you expect to play the part of holding others accountable simply are not doing that in ways that is effective or even impactful, that has meaning, in that it brings about different results, then we as citizens and as the electorate have to start thinking differently about how we become the solution to some of these problems, because ultimately the power does sit with us. Yes, we only vote every 5 years, but it doesn't mean that in between we are absolutely hamstrung, that there's absolutely nothing we can do. So that's part of what I'm hoping for, that this conversation will bring about, because these are issues that we see continually in Auditor General reports and many others, that they point to a lack of accountability. And I want to hear from you. Where are which are the most effective levers of accountability for local government?
Good morning, Kathy, and I suppose because we're seeing each other for the first time, we'll do the Happy New Year's and get them out of the way.
I'm so rude. Compliments of the new year, Mielane.
Compliments to everyone who listens to this show. And of course, this is, about solving national issues, big issues, local government. It's a big issue. We heard, as well in terms of, how, the solutions are coming forward for local government. But really, I think the question you are asking is, local government within itself has very strong mechanisms which have been put in the constitution, it's in the policies, it's in the local government white paper, it's in all the aspects which allow local government in effect to be able to cross-check itself, to be able to play, oversight, within itself. And let's start, with the understanding that when you look at a municipality or within local government, and I think the concept of local government, maybe we must just expand it a little bit. Local government is not just municipalities. Local government is everything that has governance at a local level. So which means it includes the citizenry, it also includes the royal leadership, it includes various civic bodies, and then it includes obviously the local government, the municipalities, as you would have them as formal structures. And this is something which is also in the constitution. So firstly, we look at how all of those structures can be working together, but let's start internally within the municipality. We have obviously council, which is the highest decision-making body within the municipality. You then also have committees that are set up in a way to augment or to support or to become a conduit within which decisions can be made and debated, and resolutions can then be presented ultimately at council. So you can talk about the Section 80 committees, which are your oversight committees, which would now cover different portfolios, whether it's a finance portfolio, whether it's the city planning portfolio, whether it's the economic development portfolio, the policing portfolio. So all of the portfolios that would make the departments of a municipality, there are committees that are set up. Firstly, to play an oversight, they are chaired. There are councillors who are members of those committees, and there would be resolutions, or at least items that are serving in those committees before they eventually make it into council. So that is at least to look at how the oversight mechanisms within a municipality would start. You also have then who would be call it the political head of department, which is your MMCs, your members of the mayoral committee. They would also have to play an oversight role, directly working with the HODs or the group heads, or whichever terminology is used, but the heads of department who are there. So firstly, you have independent committees playing oversight. You have the members of the mayoral committees that must also play an oversight role. Then you have the mayoral committee, which must sit every so often to consider all the range and different items from the different subcommittees, the different departments, to literally debate on them and make sure that those items are congruent with what the municipality must achieve. You also then have what would then be independent, your equivalent of SCOPA, which is the Municipal Public Accounts Committee, which is also an independent body that can also probe matters of concern, as opposed to just playing oversight. And then you have audit committee. So you can understand and appreciate that within a municipality there are a number of structures that have been set up to play that oversight role. So by the time it breaks out into the AG is here, there ought to have been a number of gates that items or decisions or resolutions are taken through until a point where it breaks out into the outside of the municipality. Of course, the other aspect is that when these items serve at council, us as citizenry can go and sit in council, we can go and observe, we can go and write, whatever is of concern and petition the speaker. The speaker's office is also another one that, comes into play here. There's also the whippery, so there are a lot of different structures within a municipality. So if we talk governance within a municipality, we are talking about from the departments, from the Section 80 committees, into the municipal, into the mayoral committee, into council, into your MPECs. So the checks and balance into the audit committees. So the checks and balances within municipalities, really, we should not be having a situation where things are a surprise when they hit the media, or things are a surprise when they are discovered by other independent bodies such as the Auditor General. But the issue here is, why are those committees not able to catch the issues, not able to correct the issues, not able to at least set the right course, and so on and so forth? I think that then it goes to accountability. There is an accountability framework that must be followed, that each one must be able to at least subject themselves to that accountability.
Before we get into the accountability framework, with all the layers and levers that have been put in place, what it then suggests is, when something has gone wrong, it has gone wrong either through complicity, or that somebody somewhere has not done what they were supposed to do. Explain part of what we are seeing at within municipalities, because the dysfunction, right, for those municipalities that do have challenges, the dysfunction is across the board. But yet there are these committees that are supposed to be sitting, that are supposed to be doing work. So that means that there are opportunities, there are steps that give opportunity to say, is this the right direction? Is this the wrong direction? Are we doing the right thing? Are we not doing the right thing? So when we see the wrong thing happening, and happening consistently, what does it tell us about these committees and other well, these are not organizations, but groupings that exist within a municipality that are supposed to improve the functioning of the municipality?
Well, I think the two matters that you advance in terms of one, perhaps people are not doing the right things, or they don't know what the right things are, of which it should never be an excuse, because most of the people or everyone who is within a municipality gets at least a brief. If you're a councillor, you are trained, this is how this department works, this is how the structures of council work. And if you're an official, you are qualified to be in that position, or you should be qualified, or you have to be qualified to be in that particular position. So the issue that we have here is that let's take away the fact that there are mistakes that can be made. That we must just write it in, that there could be mistakes that are made, of which then mistakes should be corrected. I think that we can put to one side. Number two, the issue of people not holding, or at least various structures not holding each other accountable. That is, I think, another factor which tends to be a bigger factor, where it almost goes now into complicity, if we may put it in those terms. It's perhaps so and so has done whatever the case may be, it was required for XYZ. We're not going to take it all the way, in terms of hauling this particular individual or set of individuals over the coals because of whatever the reasons that may be. And I think that is what, in a way, most of us as the public, and you can bring the best consultant, for instance, you can diagnose all of those things, but there are personalities. There are people who perhaps belong to the same persuasion, in terms of whether it's the political party or whether it's various social structures that would connect people. So I think the biggest thing that for local government we ought to be addressing, it's those issues where there's complicity, or it's those issues where we turn a blind eye, whether deliberately or whatever the case may be. But I think the issue and the resolve must be, we ought to be fixing if things go wrong, and we must hold each other accountable to the extent to which the gravity of the matter requires, and of course the policies and the statutes and the constitution and everything that drives council, your MFMAs, your all of the legislation that exists within local government.
Who sits in these committees?
So who sits in these committees? Firstly, we have the political side. We have obviously the administrative side. Who sits in the committees is mainly councillors, okay? Because councillors are there not to be operational. They are there to play an oversight, role. You would have, your PR councillors, you'll have your ward councillors, and so on. So they would be, in effect, chairing these committees, where officials or administrative side must come and present, all the different things, and they must interact with all of these, items, and they must make, decisions from there. Because if you then move up, from the Section 80 committees, you go into the mayoral committee, it's still councillors. But however, there's invitation to say, officials, you come and take us through what all of these things mean, what the decisions are that you require. And obviously, those are moments of accountability to then come back and say, what are the repercussions? What is the impact? What is the cost? And so on.
So then the areas of collusion that we need to understand better come in where, for example, you have councillors of a particular political party sitting in these committee structures, and then you also have representatives, officials within a municipality that are also from the same party or that are serving the same interests, right? Because I think how you phrase it is good, especially given the fact that we are in a dispensation of coalition governance. So people might not belong to the same party, but certainly may be pushing the same interest. And so if there isn't honesty in how both entities, whether the officials, whether the councillors are doing their work, then they are likely to pass off certain matters, simply because there's a common end goal that both are looking for.
Absolutely. And I think we must also then add to what you've just said, that in those committees, they are multi-party. There will be councillors from different, parties, which I think is something that, is good, because each one of the councillors are there because of their own manifesto in a way. And hopefully that manifesto is aligned to what the citizenry is requires or needs or desires to see happening. So the issue about, collusion is the fact that often there is a great thing that must be done. It's in the IDP, it's in the SDBIP. It must be delivered, in this particular year, financial year. However, all of us agree that we must build a bridge. Perhaps, where we may start, differing is, Kathy, is it your person that must do this, or is it that one's person, or is it, I'm just talking now in a very loose, fashion, which I'm sure I'll invite a lot of calls, coming up.
Mealani, I'm going to ask you to pause it there, and I want you to continue with that example, because it is a real life example of the experiences and the realities that are happening at local government level. So I don't want you to abandon that example. I want you to stay with it, and stay with that honesty as well. Otherwise, we're not going to invite you back.
Municipal Watch, bringing your local issues on the national agenda. SAFM, leading the conversations that move us.
All right, we continue the conversation on the talking point. We're looking at accountability and oversight within local government, and asking the question, what is it that we need to understand around how local government is structured, so that when we want to begin exercising our own oversight as the electorate, we know exactly where we should be going, and we understand when things have gone wrong. We have an understanding of what it is that would have needed to go wrong for things to be the way they are. Because sometimes it's easy to blame, let's say, the mayor for something that has gone wrong. But whatever the mayor is implementing is not of his own accord. There are others in the system who would have had opportunity to do something different, right? But they don't do that. And so those people must equally be held accountable, because you have people that stay in the system for years who are enablers. And that's why the corruption continues, regardless of who the mayor or the municipal manager might be, because those that are part of the system are entrenched, and they are holding on to it, and they've put whatever they need to be in place to remain that way. And nobody actually challenges the fact that they're these frameworks that enable the corruption to happen on an ongoing basis. Mealani Holeni is Chief Group Advisor at Ndiso Consulting, and he's our guest this morning, helping us unpack and understand some of these structures within a local government a framework. So Mealani, you are telling us about the committees and helping us understand the role that these committees play. And the question that I was asking was around collusion, to say that if the officials have to come and account before the committees, but you have individuals within these structures that are both pursuing a common interest, then help us understand how that in and of itself can become problematic. And you gave the example of a bridge, and I want you to pick up on that example. Yes, everybody, IDP says, let's build a bridge. The community says, we want a bridge. Now it's sitting within the municipality, with council, with committees. Let's pick it up from there.
So in terms of, and I think it's a classical example that, we can translate into many different areas. A bridge must be built. I mean, now we've got floods, we have rains, we have this and all of that. the whole idea is that, we'll be able to cross over. It will facilitate, economic activity and so on. Now, you go into the administrative side, it must go into supply chain management. Okay, it should be a process which it's legislated. There are policies, there's statutes, and all of those different things. However, I think collusion must be understood in a way that someone says to someone, "I think I have someone who can do this." It starts, with perhaps, a very innocent, conversation. And let me even complicate it. Could even be someone who comes from that same ward. And how nice would it be? Because perhaps that person in that same ward can even give jobs to the people within the ward. And, it's a very nice story. However, the supply chain management process should be run clean, should be run transparently, should be run cost effectively, and in some ways it should be a black box. But and when I say black box, it must not matter who comes out at the end. However, whoever comes out at the end as being successful must meet the entire criteria without anything having to be condoned or anything having to be removed, whatever the case may be. The specification should be followed as it is. So now collusion happens obviously in that way, where I believe that so-and-so in my ward, as an example, can do this better. The job should come to the ward so that, people can be empowered. It's a very good statement, which, so then it starts, from there, because now everyone else who hears the statement is now going to start looking for ways to advantage one from the other. Okay. And you find that, perhaps, that person who's being advantaged or the company may not be as qualified as the other 10 that are there. Then we have a problem.
Is this now where the lobbying within the committees takes place about who should get a certain contract? Because we've heard of those kind of examples where, yes, somebody emerged, they were not the most qualified, and we all get to hear about the scandal of 36 million that went into a bridge that was never built, and investigations show that this person should never have received this contract in the first place, but they managed to survive all of these processes, Mielani. They managed to get through supply chain management. They passed the test.
So I think let's separate the committees that would obviously be populated by councillors and the ones that would be administrative, because supply chain management is within the administrative side. Okay, so all I'm saying is that it's not even a committee, it's not even in the roads and transport subcommittee, if I may put it in those terms. It's possibly someone there who believes that I should at least pass a message, or I have a mandate, whatever the case may be. Some of these things are even made up, for some whatever reason, that a word goes in to say, hey, with that tender we have interest, in a way. So and those things are not in the committees. Those things are kind of outside of the committees. They're in the periphery, they're in the whatever the case may be. And I think that's how pervasive the local government system is, because you have formal committees that are supposed to be discharging various responsibilities and so on. If anything happens outside of a committee, do you blame the committee? Do you blame the person? Do you blame the system? However, the result is that someone who was not qualified, if I may use the simple term, has now been awarded something which they are supposed to be working on, and then nothing happens. So I think at that point when nothing happens, or the quality is not delivered, or the work is not done, that is a point of now getting back into the committees to say, hey, oversight, we're seeing that there's a bridge not built and whatever the case may be. However, none of the minutes in the committee will indicate that they said they want whoever to win, because that's not what they are presiding over. So collusion it's a parallel structure, let me put it in that way.
So I understand in terms of how some of these conversations are informal conversations. So you're not going to go and find them on minutes of meetings or anything like that. But it is important for us to see how these two structures, administrative and political, how they feed into each other. Because if we don't understand how they feed into each other, then the lack of accountability won't make sense. As you are saying, once the bridge is not built, but the funds have been spent, an official has to come and give account before these committees. They have to give account before council. And so if it's treated as, oh, well, nothing to see here, just another day, let's move on, that says that those people that are supposed to be effecting that accountability are not. Now, if you're doing your job, why would it be in your interest, or why would it serve you to not want to know, to not want to understand what went wrong? The reason it serves you is because you probably had a hand. Or if you didn't have a hand, you know that I can't say anything, either for the sake of my grouping, for the sake of, okay, I know if I say something, I'm going to be upsetting others that are more powerful than I am, so I'm going to turn a blind eye. But we have to understand how the system feeds into each other, because it does.
I think the simplest way for now to kick into accountability is job has been awarded or tender has been awarded. It's a 12 months task that must be undertaken, and there are checkpoints. So this is where the management aspect comes in. You are going to have to manage the progress, and the progress must be in tandem with what is disbursed, from a financial point of view. And it must also be visible that, or at least, the completion in 12 months, 100% of the work will be done to the quality, to the cost. Give and take, there may be variations here and there because of, you hit, different issues on the site. But if all of those things, for instance, it's at 3 months, you can not have claimed, 80% of what the job is all about, as an example. And those are flags that, must be at least taken into account. And this is now still at the management level, because there are engineers who are managing this. There's a project manager who's managing this. There's now an HOD who must be presiding and looking at the progress of where are things at. And there must also, from a finance point of view, the ones who are paying the invoices, there must be the measurements that are given must be at least, correct, accurate, and have been checked in that way. So you can see that, the system should be working together in a complementary fashion. Now, the failure points is where I, as a project manager, approves that 60% of the work has been done when only 10% of the work has been done. Okay, and I can at least substantiate and put whatever documents. And when they sometimes go into the finance, fold, if you don't have that expertise, or you don't have a QS, or you don't have the capacity to be able to check all of these things, you know what? The engineer says so. Who am I not to at least proceed and make the payment? Because if we don't make the payment, we hold the job back and so on. So when those things, start to fester in that way, you start creating now a system where someone keeps a blind eye. Someone may not have known someone, and so on. So that's how at least, accountability, the moment we know, and remember, accountability is in retrospect. The moment we know that the bridge ought to have been completed in 12 months and it has not been completed, then the questions, should be arising. The ward councillor is also there in place. The bridge is not completed. We said it's going to be whatever, this is the period. Now it must go into the ward council committees. It must go into now the subcommittees. That is how accountability. And of course, the municipal manager is obviously must be in the fold and must have at least been appraised in all of that. Now it goes back to saying, where did the problem, or who is the one person who started all of this and was not managing properly? And that's where at least, and you would hope that, there are no other linkages that, would quarantine or would, gain protection for whoever. And I think, when the moment you start going into a someone being protected, then it means accountability is not being implemented or enacted.
I mean, just listening to that, Mielani, and we've got quite a number of listeners that want to engage on this issue. So we're not going to expand further.
Yeah.
This is the year for us to build on the understanding, right? So we can pick it up in another conversation. Listening to what you're saying, just looking at the administrative end, it also means that when something has gone wrong, there are officials within the system that have, as you're saying, others maybe have been misled, but others have chosen to turn a blind eye. They for whatever reason, but they've chosen to simply overlook whatever it is that they might be that they're supposed to be aware of, which then also helps us to understand why individuals who work in the finance units in municipalities end up coming under such threat. Because if you have an invoice on your table that you're supposed to pay, but when you look at the file, it doesn't make sense, and you question it doesn't make sense, you are expected to ignore what the facts are telling you and to pay the invoice.
And I think where you are misled, I think, we've also spoken about, mistakes, can happen within a system. Where you're misled, unfortunately, you have been misled. However, also, as that person who is sitting with those documents which are not making sense, then kicks in the issue of saying, I'm going to escalate this because I possibly maybe report to a manager in terms of, treasury or expenditure, or I'm going to escalate this to the CFO, or I'm going to escalate this to eventually to the municipal manager. So each one of us have that responsibility to be able to escalate whatever issues that are not congruent with what we're supposed to be delivering or undertaking or implementing. So that is why I think, in this case, whether there's pressure, whether there's this, whether there's that, the right thing always is, if something doesn't make sense, it ought to be escalated to a higher level, and to a higher level, and to a higher level, until it's corrected, because that's how some of these things can be corrected. And well, one would only hope and sincerely believe that perhaps it was a mistake. Let's understand it was a mistake. It's corrected. It's done. If it was not a mistake, it still needs to be corrected in that way, because then it's an accountability statement that says, I as an engineer, this is what I am supposed to do. If there is this issue, I need to report this issue 100% accurately and clearly, and if things have not happened the way that they should happen, I should take the steps that I have been given to correct the issue, and if it flows over to the next department and so on. So accountability in this case is, now we are pinpointing it to that individual. So we can talk about committees, we can talk about all of these structures, but remember, those structures are made up of people. They are made up of some as people who are skilled. They are made up of people who have experience. They are made up of people who have been, if not, they have at least the power to ask, or at least the wherewithal to ask, the right questions to be able to get to the bottom of what the situation is and be able to discharge a decision or a resolution or send back the matter for consideration. So I think the issue of accountability, when we now take it out, into the open, it's an individual stance that one takes because of the responsibilities that they've been given, the expertise that they have, the qualifications that they have, the position that they have within an institution, and in this case, within the municipality.
All right. So some of your contributions this morning, I see some of you asking us, you feel like we've started the conversation a step ahead, that we need to go back to the beginning of services. Planning starts at IDP, and how projects find themselves on the IDP, public participation budgets. Look, I thought that those are matters that maybe most of us, at least who've been engaged on this particular segment, have an understanding of how it works. But I'm happy for us to do that this year, because it is so relevant with an election that's coming up. So we certainly take that feedback. Somebody else says, Kathy, you also have Section 79, which is convened by MMCs and senior municipal Section 56 managers. I don't know if you want to talk about that before I bring in our callers.
Yeah. I think, thank you so much for that, because it's important to also name what we're talking about. When I said there's members of the mayoral committee, that is the Section 79, because that's where the MMCs must sit with the officials for that particular department, so that they have the progress, appraisals, the discussions, and so on. The Section 80, in this case, is more the councillors that can also invite as well the officials, which is the Section 56, and the Section 56 would be your term, if you want, employees, which is your CFOs or your municipal managers, because they have a defined fixed term that is, and Section 57 as well. So it's just, the naming of it. So thank you for that. But, the Section 79 is your members of the mayoral committee, who are also going to now report into the mayoral committee, which will have all the other members of the mayoral committee chaired by the executive mayor within the structure, and still with your other Section 56 and 57 employees participating and giving feedback and answering questions and clarifying issues within there.
Let me go to Enadale. Mboneni, good morning to you.
Very good morning. And thanks for taking my call, and good morning once more to SAFM listeners.
Yes, sir.
And I'm coming to the show not to challenge your guest, but I also want to outline something that is happening in the community or ward when we have such projects like building classes or school itself or clinics. So what is happening there with the committee in terms of selection, which of course most that they want to be entrepreneur, they are not sure what to do with your company. Firstly, you got a CK from a CIPC, and therefore you also generate a BE certificate. Therefore, you go to SARS and also opening your bank account and also register a company on a CSD. You also go for COIDA, and then you go for CIDB. So most of the companies in the community, Casey, with your guest there, is the fact that they don't have all those things that I've mentioned. Somebody's having a CK, and then he went further on to do business card. He said, I've got a company that doesn't have a bank account, a company that doesn't having a BE certificate, and all those sort of things. That's where the problem, when there's a fight, is because we do have people that have been shortlisted with a CK, and during the process, they will be told to go and open the bank account and all. No experience, no CIDB, because the criteria state clearly if you are building a class. Companies that they should be there is either you are in grade 1 or grade 2. And normally now, what I can tell you in this country now is the fact that, and if you recall on the Sunday Times, 2 billion that were meant to build schools. Schools are unfinished, and the SGBs, and all these senior people, they were involved to the contractor to take money, and the contractor end up not finishing the scope of work because of those greediness that is happening in the community. So guess I will say, criteria is just clear to say, have your CK, have your CSD, have your COIDA, have your CIDB, if possible, if you have an NHRBRC certificate. So those are the fundamental key. But in our community, it is not happening. That is where the corruption within the municipalities are happening. I'll also give you an example about storm drainage.
Okay, very briefly, please, Mboneni.
Sorry?
Very briefly, there are other callers I want to put up.
Okay, thank you. And so all in all, to your guest, I want to ask a question that based on your experience to all what you have alluded on, are you getting people that they have, besides 10, I'm talking about in the community, who are having all these things that I've listed as compliance? Thank you, Oskiti.
Okay, all right, Mboneni, thanks for that. Butana in Rosebank, good morning.
Good morning, my sister, and good morning to your guest.
Yes, sir.
You know, the biggest problem that we've been talking about for years, crooks and thieves have been planted deliberately in municipalities, in other government departments. Those people have been planted there to loot as they wish, to act with impunity as they wish. You can have as many committees as you like. And by the way, remember, those crooks and thieves, they have to be professionalized. Going there to steal, we have to be professionalized. Tell me, Kathy, a CFO who cannot put together a financial statement and employed now the consultant at the later stage. Even if they've employed those people, they don't have record keeping, track record. They don't have records. And money is still siphoning out in municipalities. We have to be honest. We have to be truthful. Say the crooks that are there in Kurilani, crooks that are there, they must be removed. Hopefully, Mazanga will help us. But this talk show, they are not getting us anywhere. Thieving is happening rampantly in municipalities.
Butana, thanks for that contribution. And it's an important point that you're making there around the professionalization of some of these individuals who are in positions that they're not qualified for. Melanie was talking about how, if you have administrators, you expect that these people are professional people. They know what to do. And I mean, I'm starting to think that part of the reason why, even when it comes to councillors, this conversation around standardizing or having a criteria, the reason why there's even such backlash to it is precisely because of this. Because if people don't understand the system well, then they're unable to engage its complexity. So they're not complicit because they're inherently corrupt. They're complicit by virtue of not knowing what's going on. And so you can do whatever you want anyway. The outcome remains the same. Brian, you're in Cape Town. Good morning.
Good morning, Kathy. I just want to make one point, and that which was mentioned earlier. You spoke about enablers and the politicians involved. Look, to me, the problem will never be solved until and unless the problem of convictions or there's no consequences. Basically, we see the Zondo Commission example. There are a lot of enablers. Is almost 100 ANC politicians, which was mentioned, and for whom a lot of evidence was provided against. And the media also plays a role in this. The media, there's been a blackout of reporting or updates on the Zondo Commission and arms deal. So we'll never get the lower levels sorted out. This has been carefully orchestrated. These people that have eventually gotten to court in the municipalities, they hire teams of lawyers to stall the whole process, and they oppose, even though there's mountains of evidence. The corruption starts at the top with Cyril Ramaphosa and Paula, and we'll never get it right any other way.
Okay. All right, Brian, thanks for that view. Melanie, we are out of time, but I think this has given us a good start. It's certainly the first of many conversations that we'll have in trying to understand how local government is structured. But a quick parting shot from you.
Well, I think from my side is we've spoken about governance. Mm-hmm. The important thing is for all of us to embrace not just as a concept, but as a very practical and tangible way of running things, to have governance structures. If we agree that this is the criteria and the standards of how things are going to work, the best we must do is, even if there's a minimum standard, is to at least be above that minimum standard. And I think the last part, is now it goes back to the individuals, because you are the person who sits in that office, or you are the person who has that power, or you are the person who's on the outside knocking on the door. Now there's also something, perhaps, the conscious, or at least, something that says, is this right? Is this wrong? Should I be doing this, or agreeing to this, or should I vehemently disagree because this is the standard that I'm being held to? And I think that is what, in the nutshell, if we talk governance and to take out, the issue of collusion, to take out, all these things that, end up, where we have to account. We have to individualize it and understand the office that one occupies to be able to discharge the right responsibilities.
That's where we'll have to leave it for today with Municipal Watch, but we'll certainly be unpacking these issues. You've given us a lot to work on, in particular from the text messages you've been sending through on WhatsApp. So we'll build on this foundation as the year unfolds.